I am going to spend the rest of my life advocating for homeschooling.
I want you to tell us about Russia, because I know that you spoke at it was the Global Home Education Conference. This was in 2018?
2018,
right?
That's right, the spring of 2018.
Okay,
Yes.
so this was a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us about being there, because I know God's doing some amazing things in that country. Tell us what he showed you through that journey.
Well, it was interesting because this was a global home education conference. So there were many people there from the United States, maybe a dozen, and there were people there from other countries, homeschool leaders, but there were probably 1,000 Russian families there who were interested in homeschooling in St. Petersburg and then in Moscow. And it was the most riveting point for me is that Father Dmitri, who has now gone to be with the Lord, stood up at one point and he said, I'm an old man, and he was an old man then in his 80s, I'm assuming. And he said, but I am going to spend the rest of my life advocating for homeschooling. And he said, because communism decimated the family and the church and the culture in Russia. And we'll talk in a minute about the things he saw. And he said, from what I can see, homeschooling is that avenue that will allow Russian families to build strong families again. And without strong families, we can't build strong churches. And without strong churches, we can't build a strong Russian culture. So he said, I am advocating for homeschooling until I die. And it was so powerful for me. It was so powerful. I did some reading after I got home to better understand. I mean, I had studied that in school and college, of course, but to realize that 85,000 priests had been killed during the times of Lenin and Stalin and all of, Russian history in the 19th century. 29,000 churches were decimated. Millions of Christians were killed, as well as academicians and artists. And, he saw travesty and tragedy and calamity. And it was really interesting because in my reading, I came across a quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who said that it's interesting that the hatred of God is the principal driving force behind communism and leftist radical politics. It's not politics. It's not economics. It's the hatred of God. It's their central pivot. And, that was so enlightening for me. And so here with homeschooling, we have an opportunity to build strong families for strong cultures, strong churches, and a strong culture. And we need to not be part of that generation that forgot God. Solzhenitsyn also said the main problem with the Russian culture is they had forgotten God. And so we need to remember that we can't forget God. We've got to remember God in the way we educate our children. And, it just goes back again to how we view the family and view our children. We also went on a tour when we were in Moscow, and we saw Russian factories and apartments that were dilapidated at this point. But our tour guide was explaining that the families would drop their children off in daycare when it was dark outside and pick them up after dinner most days, and they would work in the factories all day long. And so our Constitution tells us our Supreme Court tells us, interpreting the Constitution, that children are not the mere creature of the state. These kids in Russia were the mere creature of the state. They were there for state purposes. And it was all of this was just so instructive for me and Joe, how we love our children, love our families, stand for our families. And it was just one of those pivotal points in my life that just reaffirmed everything we had been working for since we started homeschooling in 1984.
Homeschool Insights is sponsored by CTC Math. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com and try it for free. For more great homeschool inspiration and resources, listen to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday.